we're going to move to further debate. Further debate. Recognize the member for Oshawa.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker, and I am pleased to be able to rise in my place and debate Bill 162, the Get It Done Act, or the so-called Get It Done Act, and I'm able to stand here as the official opposition critic for infrastructure, transportation, and highways. And Speaker, this bill, despite its catchy title, this bill is mostly performative, and it actually doesn't get much done. It certainly doesn't get anything done to fix health care or build housing or make life more affordable. But what we have seen in the last stretch of time is a government that has had to backtrack on many major policy decisions. I'm starting to look at bills now that they're tabled and think that we're during the, each time a new bill hits the table, that we've entered that pre-repeal time in a bill's life in this House, because so many have had to be reversed. But this government is, I'm going to assume, I won't impute motive, but I would imagine that they're quite desperate to distract from their never-ending scandals. And I don't think they love it when we remind about the RCMP investigation, etc. This is a bill called the Get It Done Act, and they can't get it done on the biggest issues facing Ontario. We have a strained healthcare system, worsening housing crisis, and the skyrocketing cost of living. Although, like I had discussed with my colleague, can't get it done or won't get it done. Yes. I mean, this is a government that has now been in power, been in charge for coming up on 6 years. So this is not first day on the job. They could be doing better, and to see a skimpy little performative piece hit the table here in this bill, I'd say it's a missed opportunity. And people across the province are struggling, and they're not interested in symbolic gestures. Yeah. They're interested in meaningful, serious solutions. I would say that we have been focused on delivering real solutions for housing, healthcare, and the rising cost of living. Speaker, this government, as we have talked in this House about Super Bowl ads, about this government's fascination with advertising, how much money and investment they're making into getting their message out to folks. So they are probably wondering what the audience response is to this particular piece of legislation. And I would say that people don't believe the hype. Nor are they excited about this nothing bill. In fact, I'd like to share from a TVO opinion piece entitled "Doug Ford's Omnibus Bill is Bad Policy That Will Accomplish Nothing." And this has been written by John Michael McGrath. I'll read. MPPs returning to, excuse me, that's not what it says at all. MPPs returned to the legislature for the spring sitting on Tuesday, and the government's first priority is a beefy new omnibus bill dubbed the Get It Done Act. Much of the bill had been previewed last week in press conferences by the Premier, who announced that the government would introduce new legislation that would prohibit the cost of road tolls on provincial highways, and that, in a separate section, would prohibit the province from introducing a carbon tax without first submitting it to a referendum. He goes on to say, they are profoundly silly acts to put before the legislature. They don't accomplish anything concrete, they can't do what they claim to, and they can't be changed into anything meaningful without committing a form of constitutional vandalism. And that's before we get to the part where they're also bad policy. There's a section that I'll come back to that is quite interesting about their carbon tax referendum piece. But as he frames it, that's the reality of governing, though. Doing meaningful things usually costs money, while performative nonsense is free. And he says, in the meantime, we're left with the irksome elements of the so-called Get It Done Act. We could call it a stunt, but stunts are usually captivating or entertaining. This bill is a dull retread of an idea that was bad the first time. And if it does anything at all, it will be to make the electorate even more ill-informed about governance than it already is. In a better world, the government would never have introduced it. Okay, So that's some of the audience reaction to this piece of legislation. But because we've had an hour from our critic responsible for the environmental pieces, I'm going to stay in my lane, pun intended, as the critic for transportation, highways, and also infrastructure. So looking at the Schedule 2 changes, there are changes to the Highway Traffic Act, and it sets a statutory driver's license fee of $7.50 for each 6-month period, equal to the, wait for it, Speaker, existing fee, which is set by regulation. Schedule 4 is the Photo Card Act. It sets a statutory photo card fee of $3.50 for each 6-month period, equal to the existing fee, which is set by minister's orders. Why I highlight the word existing is because this is not a change in the experience of Ontarians, drivers or those getting their photo card. These prices, these fees, these costs have already been determined in regulation. What this bill does, or barely does, is now put it into statute, into actual law and out of regulation. So it's a nothing burger. It's the status quo. There's no change. We're not saving anybody anything. It's the same as what they've been paying as determined by regulation. So another part that is accomplished by Schedule 2 is it establishes a framework enabling an automatic license plate renewal system with details to be determined by regulation. Speaker, while we're here, and since the government has brought it up, let's talk about license plates, because that's what they've brought us here to do. I'm a little out of practice, though. It was an everyday thing that I got to stand in this House and talk about license plates. But it has been 4 years since their absurd mess of their PC vanity plates that can't be read. And I would like to remind us with a recent piece, because folks haven't forgotten. This is a piece by Alison Jones, the Canadian Press. This was February 14th. As of this month, there are 124,000 blue license plates on the road. Premier Doug Ford, the Premier's government has a plan to get its blue license plates off the roads 4 years after discovering they are barely visible at night, and that plan is to sit back and wait. The blue license plates are set to simply disappear through attrition. That process has been in place since November 2022, according to a senior government official not authorized to speak publicly about the matter. Quote, this is from a press secretary for Public Business Service Delivery Minister. Quote, after carefully considering potential options for implementing a dedicated collections program, the Ontario government has decided to naturally phase out existing blue license plates. End quote. Speaker, it's interesting because every year around this time, so mid-February, marks sort of the anniversary of these blue license plates, and every year the media tries to figure out what the government's plan is after they had committed to getting those license plates off the road. And now the plan, and there is a plan, it was actually decided in 2022, wasn't communicated. In fact, various FOIs were unsuccessful based on the grounds that the government wasn't ready to announce it yet. And it turns out what they weren't ready to announce but had decided was, shh, let it go away. Right, was, as they put it, decided to naturally phase out existing blue license plates. Sure. But here's the thing, Speaker, and this is my question to this government, since they've brought up license plates. It has been 4 years, and again, and still we're talking about the Premier's blue license plates. There's still 125,000 or so left driving around on the roads, and each one of them is that true blue reminder of the epic fail that this whole mess has been. Yeah. And the government promised that they would get them off our roads. It has come to light, as I just read, that the new plan is a passive phase-out. Ontarians know, and Speaker, you may remember, the folks at home certainly remember, these plates disappear in bright sun, they disappear at night, they disappear when being scanned at the U.S. border. They disappear in heavy rain, and now this Premier wants them to disappear from our memories. So the PC Party blue vanity plates, while impossible to read, are impossible to forget. And so I guess I have an ongoing question. Why can't they just fix this? Like, why won't they just, quote, get it done when it comes to license plates? And look, the government or the Premier had said the other day that we needed to learn about, I don't even remember, marketing and branding and stuff like that. But here we have physical, tangible, visible reminders of an epic and ongoing fail, right, of ineptitude or a rush job or I don't know. But people look at them, and yes, it's a safety problem. I mean, they're appropriate for a getaway car, sure, but other than that, people see them, and except for those who are a bit sentimental and are keeping them as collector's plates, I think folks, every time they see them, think, oh, yeah, man, they sure can't get it done, can they? So, you know, if you want to talk about branding and you want to talk about marketing, maybe that's a case study for the Premier. But, Speaker, I will continue. Speaker, Schedule 6, I will continue with that one. I'm going to skip a few of the others because as the critic for transportation, I'm going to stay focused on what the government has given me, and that is Public Transportation and Highway Improvement Act is Schedule 6. It prohibits tolls on provincial highways unless the toll is authorized by an act. Schedule 6 would prohibit tolls on highways that already have no tolls. So we're prohibiting tolls from where they aren't and don't exist, but would not prohibit tolls on the one Ontario highway that does have true tolls, Highway 407. And remember that the Highway 407, people may think of it as one long stretch, but there are two sections. Privately owned, the Highway 407 ETR, that's the part that got sold for a song and all of us are still mad about it and paying for it. Yep. And then there's Highway 407 East, which the 407 East and the 412 and 418, those highways are still owned by the province. Okay? They haven't yet sold them to some foreign consortium. Still ours. So only one highway in Ontario has true tolls, and the tolls are authorized by the Highway 407 Act and the Highway 407 East Act. And those are untouched by this nonsense piece of legislation in front of us. And the fact that the government keeps choosing not to rein in the high tolls on the 407, the government is missing an opportunity to make better use of the underutilized highway. They could be reducing or removing tolls for transport trucks. The NDP has proposed that. They've been hearing that across various stakeholder groups. And also in 2021, the Ford government inexplicably waived $1 billion in congestion penalties that was owed by the private 407 ETR operator for setting tolls too high and allowing traffic to fall below minimum values required under the agreement with this government. So legitimately, they didn't meet what they had, their obligations. And even though during that time, because you may remember it was around COVID time, but the other 407, or excuse me, no, not the other 400 series highways were congested at that time. People were on the roads. Highway 407 was so underused that a plane was able to land on it in the middle of the day with no problem. We have called on the government to go after the 407 ETR for those congestion penalties, but this government, and I won't put words in their mouth, but what's $1 billion? Exactly. They waived it and legitimately was owed that and chose chose to waive it. Speaker, Bill 162 would prohibit tolls on provincial highways unless the toll is authorized under an act. It's the funny thing is, as the Auditor General noted in her 2022 report on highway planning, quote, the ministry does not have authority under the Public Transportation and Highway Improvement Act to implement tolls on provincial highways. Literally, the provincial government doesn't have the authority to implement tolls on provincial highways. So here in this bill, they're like, we're going to ban tolls. they don't actually have the authority to implement them. Fun fact. The provincial, anyway, so they don't have the authority without a highway-specific act, which brings us back to the Highway 407 Act and the Highway 407 East Act, which are unchanged by this schedule. Speaker, earlier today, I took the opportunity to ask the Minister of Transportation directly about a resolution that was passed today by the Region of Durham, by their council. It was a motion requesting the permanent removal of tolls on the provincially owned portion of Highway 407 between Brock Road in Pickering and Highway 35-115. I won't read the whole thing, but I will set it up for folks at home. Whereas Highway 407 from Brock Road in Pickering to Highway 35-115 is provincially owned and tolls are set by the province. And whereas the province introduced legislation that, if passed, would ban tolls from provincially owned highways, including all 400 series highways except for Highway 407, which is located almost exclusively in Durham Region. And whereas, if excluded from the proposed ban on tolls, Highway 407 would become the only tolled provincially owned highway in Ontario, resulting in unfair economic impacts to Durham Region residents and businesses. And whereas, I am reading more of it than I was planning, but they say it's good stuff. And whereas the province of Ontario has previously removed tolls on highways 412 and 418 located within Durham, demonstrating the willingness to removing existing unfair tolls on provincially owned highways, and should therefore include the provincial 407 as part of the proposed legislation, be it resolved that they request that the province of Ontario include the provincially owned portion of Highway 407 in any legislation banning tolls on provincially owned highways. Speaker, the minister said, not in response to me, but said in his remarks, something about, quote, give our municipal partners what they need, end quote. Well, I will reiterate to the Minister of Transportation and the folks at home that we have here a municipal partner asking to have this section of a provincial highway included in this act so that the tolls would be taken off the provincial portion, the 407 East. I won't hold my breath, but it's a legit ask. And I'll tell you why I don't hold my breath, Speaker. Because the best predictor of future behaviour is past behaviour. And on January 31st, in echo to the Town of Whitby's resolution on January 16th, the Durham Region resolved that, whereas the temporary removal of tolls on Highway 407 during Winchester Road construction work would improve overall travel times and alleviate the traffic impacts on surrounding regional and local municipal roads, be it resolved that the province be requested to temporarily remove tolls on Highway 407 in Durham during the duration of the planned Winchester Road construction work. Speaker, they asked this, they sent it to the province, and that was January 31st, and by February 6th, the answer was no, like a resounding, definite no. And it says here, as was reported in the paper, an effort by Durham regional councillors to press the province to temporarily remove tolls in the Durham section of Highway 407 has received a quick, curt response, no. And the quote here, response from the Ministry of Transportation 6 days later, quote, the Ministry of Transportation is not considering subsidizing or removing tolls for use of Highway 407 at this time, end quote. And then how many minutes later, and we're dealing with Bill 162, that with all of its fanfare, we are going to be prohibiting tolls from provincial roads except where they already are. So I obviously take exception to that, because why is Durham the exception? And this is a provincial government that says we're not going to toll folks. Well, you know what? Their behaviour is having a very taking a very detrimental toll on the people in Durham Region. Speaker, unsurprisingly, I have used up my time. But I want to say there are actual things this government could choose to do to help Ontarians. There's a lot in this bill that's kind of lip service and nothing burgers and really doesn't change things or advance things, and that's a missed opportunity. Where are the interventions to make people's experience with our health care system better? Where are real affordability measures? How are we housing people because of this bill? Thank you, Speaker.
I understand that when we last debated Bill 162, the member for Oshawa had made her presentation. So now we'll go to questions and responses with respect to the presentation made by the member for Oshawa. I recognize the member for London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I was fortunate to be here yesterday when the member for Oshawa made her presentation, and she talked quite a bit about the issue of tolls, and she shared with us a motion that had just been passed by, I think that day, yesterday, by the region of Durham. And I know that one of the schedules in this bill deals with tolls, deals with removing tolls, and I wondered if the member could tell us if that schedule will do anything for the people of her community.
The member for Oshawa.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. Folks will remember the 412 and 418, and that finally I had tabled my private member's bill, and 4 years later, finally the government removed those. And part of the reason that the government finally followed through with that was because it was unfair to the broadly across Durham region, that we're the only part of the province with a tolled road. And so here we have Schedule 6 that says we won't toll provincial highways unless it's in an act. Oh, but by the way, the 407 ETR, that's the privately owned, and the 407 East, which is owned by the province, we're not touching those. And when Durham has asked for temporary removal because of construction, now that they've asked for permanent removal of the tolls from the provincial section, the government has its hands over its ears, and all we hear is crickets. So they're not taking the tolls off. It's just Durham that has a tolled stretch of highway, provincial highway. So this bill does sweet nothing for the folks of Durham.
Questions? The member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Schedule 4 of this Act has a provision, and I'll go slowly so that the member has an opportunity to refer to it if she hasn't seen it already. It says that the schedule is amended to provide that for each 6-month period or part thereof during which a photo card is valid, the holder of the photo card shall pay a fee of $3.50. So in other words, the fee is now fixed in legislation and may not be automatically amended unless another piece of legislation is introduced to amend the fee. So that's $3.50, and I would like to ask the member if she believes that fee is too low or too high or somewhere in between, and whether she agrees that it should be fixed at $3.50. Thank you.
Member for Oshawa.
Thank you, Speaker. As all members in this House, we hear from our constituents when issues matter to them, when government decisions affect them, and I can honestly say I have never once heard anything about photo cards and the fee. So I'm going to go with the $3.50 is what it is. In fact, I appreciate the member focusing on Schedule 4. I will also liken it to Schedule 2 that deals with driver's license fees and fixes it at $7.50 for each 6-month period. The $7.50 and the $3.50 for each 6-month period for photo cards now being fixed in statute are equal to the, wait for it, existing fee. So there is no change. It had been regulation, and now it's fixed in statute. So there is no change to the customer, to the community member. They're not going to feel any difference. It's just some shift it from regulation into statute, and honestly, who cares? Thank you.
Questions? The member for London West.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And again, to the member for Oshawa, last night she gave us a little bit of a history of this government's experience with license plates in Ontario. And Schedule 2 of this bill establishes a framework to enable automatic license plate renewals. I wondered if the member wanted to elaborate a little bit more on some of her concerns about this government's track record with license plates.
Member for Oshawa.
Thank you. Well, I've had a lot of opportunity to stand in my place and talk about license plates, interestingly enough, over the last 4 years. Interesting that the government is wanting to talk about license plates when every time we're on provincial roadways or in our neighbourhoods, we still see those blue reflective reminders of the ineptitude of this government, that they couldn't get it right, and now they are letting them continue to drive. Will those license plates be automatically renewed? Meh, who cares, right? So my question to this government is, when you've got a bill here that says get it done, why on earth are you directing people's attention to license plates again when you can't get them off the roads? You certainly couldn't get it done in that case. 4 years later, we're still talking about them, and the government, like those plates, while impossible to read, are also impossible to forget. And so maybe the government could get it done when it comes to license plates. Thanks.
Questions? The member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to return to the topic of fixed fees. We've heard a lot of members of this House, and I talked to many of my constituents, and they're concerned about affordability. They're concerned about prices going up and fees going up and government fees going up. I've heard many, many people express to me in my constituency, the riding of Essex, about municipal property taxes going up 6%, 7%, 8% in some instances. But there's only one government that's freezing fees and lowering taxes, and that's the PC government of the province of Ontario. So I put this question to the member opposite. Is it not a good thing that we are freezing the fees? Isn't that a good thing?
Member for Oshawa.
Okay. The fees he's talking about, according to this bill, as he's mentioned, is the $3.50 fee for each 6-month period, equal to the already existing fee, and now we're fixing it to statute, which can be changed anytime somebody else wants to change it in statute. So freezing them, okay, fixing them, it's the same as it was. The experience is the same across the community. But if they want to talk about affordability, instead of removing tolls or preventing tolls where they don't exist, why don't you remove them where they do? We've got transport trucks on the 401. We could move a lot of them to 407 if the government had any sense of thinking about how to better utilize our existing provincial infrastructure and remove those tolls for transport trucks. Or the region of Durham is asking for a temporary removal because of construction. We won't remove those fees for people in the community. And we're not removing tolls for the people of Durham region. So making life more affordable, what are you talking about? Where? How? In what way? You're keeping things the same. So, if you want to address affordability, there's a million different opportunities. If you wanted to address housing, healthcare, bring forward a bill of substance. This is tinkering around the edges and not accomplishing anything. It's a giant nothing burger. Thank you.
The next question, the member for Nickel Belt.
Kind of in line with what the previous member was asking, as to people have some worries. People would like the government to get it done on things that matters to them. The number one things that matters to a lot of people is fixing our healthcare system, so that the 2.2 million Ontarians that don't have access to primary care do, so that the hundreds of thousands of people waiting for surgery get the care that they need. There's also a housing crisis that people would very much like the government to focus on, as well as an affordability crisis. Do you see anything in this bill that will address the priority of Ontarians with health care, with housing, with affordability?
for Oshawa.
Thank you. And no, I don't. And I'll say, last night I had the opportunity to join a meeting of the local chapter of the Ontario Health Coalition in Durham Region. A lot of folks with either connections to the healthcare field or just community members who are starting to interact with the healthcare system in different ways and realizing it's not how it used to be, that it's not what they remember, that they can't access the services, and they're quite concerned. You know, this is a government that, when they talk about freezing things, with Bill 124, froze wages, right, that forced the hospitals to be fleeced and held like hostage by these nursing agencies that were not just able to get a toehold, but to take over. And so, you know, the hospitals are bleeding money to these agencies instead of being able to pay their own nurses what they would want to, right, through fair collective bargaining. So this government did that. So they're standing here and sort of, it's a sanctimonious presentation about making life better. It isn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much.